first time I was handed a tea bowl in Japan, I looked at this bowl and I thought it was off-center, it was awkward, it was crudely made, I thought, in my ignorance before I was making pottery. It was off-center, it was misshapen. In fact, it was one of the things that actually made me fall in love with Japan, because I identified with that pot. I thought, I'm misshapen, I'm awkward, I'm crude, I'm a bit off-center. If they love that pot to that extent, maybe they'll like me as well. It began in Japan. I saw an advert in the newspaper saying co-drivers wanted to go overland to Australia. So I just kept going, and I ended up in Japan. And I knew nothing about art or creativity or anything. And I arrived in Japan with $7 and the address of the youth hostel in Tokyo. So initially I was teaching conversational English, and then I met friends who took me out to a pottery village for a day out to visit. The interesting thing about Japan is Japanese chefs and studio potters work very closely together. The relationship between food and the ceramics is absolutely integral. It's creative, it's imaginative, and I was very attracted to that. So there just seemed to be handmade pots everywhere, and I just thought this was absolutely wonderful because it just enriched life. And then one day somebody said, "Oh, do you want to have a go on the wheel?" One of the pottery. So I had to go on the wheel, and just the sensuality of the soft clay, that's what actually hooked me. So I ended up moving out to Mashiko, which is a village of there's about 1,000 potters in this one village, so it's full of rich life. There's a word in Japanese, osuwaru, and osuwaru means to be in an environment where you can learn, but almost by osmosis, not by teaching. Nobody taught me. I learned by watching, and I would just sit beside one of them and watch. Nobody said, you should do it like this or you should do it like that. Nobody said anything. They just let me be. They let me find my own way. If I asked for something, they would, be incredibly generous with their time and their energy and support. I felt very supported by the atmosphere. That's what I brought from Japan as well, the fact that there's life in pots. And I came back from Japan with a Japanese pot, and he and I came back to England together to set up. He was incredibly encouraging in helping me to find my way. And so that helped to give me confidence, develop the language that you see all around you. I went into the Contemporary Ceramics Gallery in London, and luckily I became one of the first ones, if not the first one, to start using colour at high temperature stoneware in studio ceramics. And so I got a lot of attention because of that, and I was invited to exhibit all over the place because my work looked very different. Where I am now, 47 museums around the world have got my work in their permanent collections. I brought my Japanese wheel back with me, so that meant that I could carry on making pots in a Japanese way. Here's one of my teacups made on my wheel. It's got a sensuality and a softness in the clay. And I think that making pots on the wheel has the potential for expression like writing poetry does, or singing, because I do sculptural work as well. And that was triggered by a very prominent collector came to the studio one day, and he saw a pot that I'd made, and he asked me if I could make that 2 meters tall. But it worked really well. I mean, he put it outside in his garden, and now it's in the collection of Dillington House. Then not long after that, I was able to move my studio to this building that we're in now, which meant that we were able to build a large gas kiln. I've got a large studio downstairs where I can fire large pieces. The latest sculpture I've made was public artwork for St Austell Town Centre, which is the Earth Goddess, which is the tallest ceramic sculpture in the world at 13 meters tall. And then also I've made a full-size ceramic building, which is Temple. I was invited by Sotheby's to participate in an exhibition of celebrating 20th century sculpture at Chatsworth House. But the way to get started is I made a very small version. I sort of doodled about, made a small version of a temple. That did become the standard for the full-size version. And so, yeah, we made a full-size version. It's now a full-size building. And I was sort of asking myself, why did I make a temple? And I realized that my long-term partner, a man called Patrick, he had died. He wasn't a Christian, he wasn't religious. And then where do you have a memorial for somebody? There wasn't anywhere. But it made me realize that actually, if you're non-denominational in our culture, then where do you have your rituals? Where do you have your ceremonies? And I think the temple is a hugely important building. It's the first one that I know of in this culture that's made for that. And I think actually every town or city should have one.